everybody. Welcome back to a new school year. For those of you that are just joining us or anybody that's been following along for the last few years, welcome. Hope you're here for a while. For those of you that are new, I do record the videos every year for you guys. That way you guys have access to them, whether you're out sick or if we have like an AMI day or God forbid we go into a lockdown or something, you are able to still access what we're going to be doing. So this very first video, we're going to be doing our very first section of notes. This is chapter 13, section 1, starting our unit on the Renaissance. Feel free to follow along. You can pause it whenever you need to. Have that fill in the blank notes document that is posted on Classroom Opened. It literally matches what I am going through on here, okay? Also, there'll be highlights. Please highlight those. Those are very important. Those will help you when we get to the quiz at the end of the section, okay? So without further ado, for the first time this school year, let's go ahead and get your notes out and let's get started. All right, so section 1 is introducing the Renaissance. Our main learning objectives today are going to be like identifying some key terms and kind of just explaining what the Italian Renaissance is. All right, so let's talk about the Renaissance in whole. This is really a period of time from about 1300 to 1600. So we're covering a pretty big chunk of human history at this point. It's also a term that means rebirth. The Renaissance was a period of creativity and change. We'll talk about that in the sense of politics, society, the economy, culture. Prior to this, the era was known as the Dark Ages, where basically learning, math, science, who needs them? They're gone. The Renaissance is a reintroduction and return to learning the classics like of Greece and Rome and the language of Latin. It's a period of exploration, which we'll talk more about next chapter, but it's also a period that focuses on individual achievement. This is also the point in history that we consider to be the transition from medieval times to modern world. So we split history into two main camps. You have your ancient history and then your modern history. The Renaissance marks the beginning of what we consider to be modern history. So really this is the time where we start to talk about like how things are affecting and they're still around today. So humanism is an intellectual movement that focused on education and the classics. This is a hallmark of the Renaissance. And within that is the idea of the humanities. This is subjects such as grammar, rhetoric, poetry, and history, mainly the classics of Greece and Rome. Also during this time, those that practiced Christianity were debating whether how worldly they should be versus how religious they should be. We'll talk a lot more about Christianity in terms of like its role during the Renaissance in a couple of sections when we get to the Reformation. Now, this gentleman pictured here, this is Petrarch. He's from the city of Florence, so he's a Florentine. He's a Renaissance humanist, poet, and scholar. He also maintained one of the largest libraries of Greek and Roman works in this part of the world. His library was said to be extremely extensive and rivaled even some of the ancient libraries like at Alexandria and like some of the major like Roman libraries as well. So we have to talk about geography. Geography is going to play a role in history regardless. So the Renaissance is based in what will become Italy. Italy does not exist as a country yet. But for ease, I am going to refer to it as the Italian Renaissance. That way you guys have an idea as to what I'm talking about. And this is due to its location. It's a crossroads of trade. It's a center of banking, manufacturing, and merchants, mainly in the Mediterranean, because it was the center of the classical world, the Roman Empire. It's where Rome is. So it makes sense that this rebirth in any sense begins here, in one of the centers of the ancient world. It's also why we see like Roman architecture and Catholicism and its religious themes being big parts of the Renaissance. Along with this is an idea known as cultural diffusion. This is the general spread of culture over time. It's like the idea that, let's say something's popular here in Carthage, and then it becomes over time popular in like Webb City, Joplin. It's gradually spreading over time. It's why some things that we do here in the United States are popular in other countries. That culture has spread over the decades. So a little bit more in Italy. Just like ancient Greece, they had city-states. Now, each was controlled by wealthy, powerful merchant families. Specifically, we're looking at the city of Florence. This is the birthplace of the Italian Renaissance, where the powerful family that controlled it was the Medicis. Cosimo de' Medici in 1434 basically declared themselves the uncrowned rulers, and his son Lorenzo the Magnificent. We're in the point of history where people start giving them these titles like Lorenzo the Magnificent, Richard the Lionheart, Ivan the Terrible. Oops. Um, Basically becoming these ideal rulers. They're also patrons of the arts. These are like financial supporters. To explain this today, like if you watch any like major YouTuber and they talk about like Patreon, um, where they're patrons, the people that enjoy their work can support them financially. That is what a patron is. We still have that concept today. People sponsoring theater programs and like sports programs, those are patrons. Now, moving on to art, really, the Renaissance is a big period of art. It reflects humanism. It portrayed religious themes, well known figures, and reflected individual achievement, along with realism. These are new techniques. The people in these paintings looked like actual people. One of the big things here is the idea of perspective. This is three-dimensional, it creates depth in pictures, and there's a vanishing point. So if we're looking at these two images over here, we have a horizon. Whereas prior to this, paintings was like everything's right up front. Now we're like, oh, we have this here in the front, but we also have this stuff here in the back that's smaller but further away. And it creates a vanishing point because eventually things get so small that they disappear. It also reflects the study of human anatomy. People in these paintings look like people. We'll look at a couple examples in a minute, but let's talk about some artists with Leonardo da Vinci, or you know what, I'm going to throw the meme in here. Da Vinci? Some of his famous works include the Mona Lisa and the Last Supper. Now, Da Vinci is considered to be a Renaissance man. This is someone of broad achievement with talent in many areas. We have a term for this today. Like, if you've heard the term like jack of all trades, that's what a Renaissance man is. They have a lot of curiosity. They're interested in the classics. They're adventurous. They thrive on education, and like they're really focused on that sort of thing. We also have Michelangelo. Are you sensing a theme? We're talking about Ninja Turtles here, except for Donatello. We're not talking about him. Sadly, he doesn't play that big of a role in the Renaissance, but he is still there. So Michelangelo was a sculptor, engineer, painter, architect, and poet. He created the Statue of David, which is pictured here, which reflects the harmony and grace of ancient Greek sculpture. The Pieta, the biblical Mary cradling her dead son Jesus, and of course, probably his most famous piece aside from David and the Pieta, is the Sistine Chapel, the murals up on the ceiling. That took 4 years to complete. I don't know about you guys, but laying on my back painting a ceiling with my arm up for 4 years makes my back hurt. It depicts the biblical history of the world, basically from the point of creation to the flood in Noah's Ark. His designs as an architect also are heavily influenced still today. St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome and even the U.S. Capitol building are based off of architectural designs from Michelangelo. Now our next turtle, Raphael, blends Christian and classical styles. He painted the School of Athens, which we looked at a couple slides ago when we talked about the vanishing point. This is an imaginary gathering of great scientists and thinkers from the ancient world like Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, which most of them weren't alive at the same time, or they happened to be teacher and student. He also heavily focused on portrayals of the Madonna, the mother of Jesus. We'll actually look at that a little bit more in a little bit. So let's talk about architecture. Renaissance architecture heavily rejected the Gothic architecture of the Middle Ages and the medieval period, and they're more so going to adopt things like columns, arches, domes, really harkening back to this classical, like ancient Greece and Rome style of architecture. It's where we get like things like Corinthian pillars that are like heavily popular in the American South. That's from classic like ancient Rome, but was brought back during the Renaissance. So let's compare the two a bit. So the Middle Ages art was, well, both arts were religious, but who was paying for them was different. During the Middle Ages, it was primarily the church, whereas during the Renaissance, it was based on what the patron wanted. The person that was paying you told you what they wanted. Figures in Middle Age art were long and stiff. They were unnatural, like geometric patterns, like very abstract, and they showed little to no emotion. Whereas during the Renaissance, their faces were more rounded, realistic. They actually had emotion, joy, pain, sadness. They displayed all of that. A little bit more in terms of background on the Middle Ages. Art that was more solid or patterned, scenes appeared flat, there was no clear light source. While as the Renaissance art looks more natural. There's depth and perspective, there's light and shadow, it makes it look more real. And then in terms of architecture, again, the Middle Ages was more Gothic, churches were shaped like crosses, and homes were just simple squares. Whereas architecture during the Renaissance hugged the earth. It's like very eco-friendly, actually. The way it's designed is like if you were building up a hill, the building was meant that the side of it that came into contact with the hill sloped to match the hill. Lots of arches, columns, domes. Churches were being more circular or squared when they were being built, and homes utilized courtyards. So think about it like you had a nice little patio in the center of your house. So here's a good comparison of these different pieces of art, and I'm going to try and move my little bubble up here so I'm out of the way so you can see this. So this is depicting the same thing. This is the Madonna and Child during the Middle Ages. This is the Madonna and Child during the Renaissance. Again, we can see the clear differences. These two look like real people. These two look like the demons from Bandersnatch or the Babadook that are about to come and snatch you. They don't look like actual humans. I mean, like, legitimately, look at those fingers. Those don't look natural, do they? There's also no emotion. Like, she's looking at you and be like, what are you doing, fool? Whereas this Madonna is, like, being kind and, like has, like, clear emotions being portrayed. So the last thing we're going to talk about is writing. There's a lot of focus on the humanities. With philosophy and scholarship, and really there's a lot of guidebooks written during this period. These are basically how to achieve success in the Renaissance world. Basically, they're like the how-to for dummies that we have today, but during the Renaissance. We have Baldassare Castiglione, this gentleman right here, who wrote the Book of the Courtier, which describes manners, skills, and learning and virtues of a member of the court should have. And then probably the more famous one, Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince, which is a guide for rulers on how to gain and maintain power. Basically, Machiavelli was like, you do what you ever have to do to achieve your goals. The end justifies the means. That means you go kill your enemy's family to take power, you do it. That means you set somebody's house on fire to scare them, you also do that. Basically, it's like you do whatever you can to get power and hold on to it. And a lot of people used Machiavelli's system to gain power. All right, that is it for notes for today. In terms of what you're going to be doing now, if you're in the honors class watching this video, you have a reading assignment that's on Google Classroom. Everybody else, and this includes the honors class, there's an activity we'll be doing on Machiavelli that'll be on paper. Otherwise, hopefully you got all these notes down. It's now time for the section quiz. I will see you all next time. Bye, guys.